The Chicago Cubs have finally given the people what they want. They have called up top infield prospect Matt Mervis. Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On MLB Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Yes, welcome on in to Locked On MLB Prospects, your home for all things minor league baseball. I'm your host, Lindsey Crosby, freelance baseball writer and podcaster. Thank you for making this your first listen every single day. We're probably part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. And today's episode is made possible by our friends at Rocket Money. Stop throwing your money away, cancel unwanted subscriptions, and manage your expenses the easy way by going to rocketmoney.com/LockedOnMLB. So our prospect of the pod, first baseman Matt Mervis, is being called up by the Chicago Cubs. By the time you are watching this, the transaction will be in the works. So we do not know who the roster move will be, but Matt Mervis is joining the Chicago Cubs for their series starting on Friday. And the reason why this is such a big deal is because, one, he really should have been up already. And two, it makes too much sense. So let's back up a little bit. For those who aren't everydayers, who don't understand our fascination with Matt Mervis, 2020 undrafted free agent out of Duke. And normally there's a different type of understanding about an undrafted free agent, but 2020, you'll remember, was a weird draft where you only had 5 rounds. So a lot of guys that would have been draft picks and would have been valued as such by organizations were instead undrafted free agents that had the bonus amount limited by Major League Baseball, missed that whole season, and then started in their organizations in 2021. So Matt Mervis, last year, was his first year full-time in professional baseball. He goes 137 games between High A South Bend, Double A Tennessee, and Triple A Iowa. 309, 379, 606 is the slash line. He has a season slash line, or a season slugging of 606, 36 home runs, 78 extra base hits for Matt Mervis in 137 games. So better than one every other game. 50 walks to 107 strikeouts, and 2 for 2 on stolen bases. And it's something where he's that big lefty plus raw power masher, right? And he made a lot of changes going into 2022 to better make that profile work. So he shortened the swing a little bit. He worked on the pitch recognition and the plate discipline, kind of wanted to focus on those pitches in the middle third of the plate that he could drive. Obviously, being a power hitter, he's got that natural uphill swing. And some of the issues that he had left was he was struggling with off-speed and vertical breaking pitches below the zone, right? And then he had to make sure that his platoon splits didn't get too out of hand, where he could still be effective against the same handedness against lefties like he was against righties. So this year, 24 games, 286, 402, 560, 6 home runs, 13 extra base hits, 18 walks to 19 strikeouts in AAA. He's walking just as much as he strikes out, and it's still less than once a game. And he's crushing baseballs. 560 slugging, again, 13 extra base hits in 24 games. So when you watch him and you pull up the StatCast stuff for AAA, he's not chasing. He has gotten a lot better on dealing with off-speed below the zone. And so really the only real struggles he's going to have are going to be if you can effectively pitch him up and away with either something that's going to tempt him to chase, or you can locate fastballs up and away. Being a lefty hitter, having that uphill swing like he does, they're sometimes prone to missing elevated fastballs. So that's going to be the issue for Matt Mervis from an offensive standpoint. Now, defensively, the speed isn't great. It's probably a 30 grade. And the defense isn't phenomenal at first. It's below average, but it's enough. It's enough defense where you can have him out there and you're not actively hurting your team. I mentioned this already. We don't necessarily know exactly what the transaction is going to be, but common sense kind of says there's a really good possibility by the time you're listening to this that Eric Hosmer has been DFA'd to make a space for Matt Mervis. The issue, so Eric Hosmer, 13th year in the league, right? He's a veteran. He's playing first base at an above average level. I think he's 85th percentile and outs above average at first base, which is, kind of like saying it's the prettiest pig in the stall, but still decent defense at first base. And that's just something that Mervis struggles with. But Eric Hosmer's slash, that's the only thing Eric Hosmer's doing well right now. His slash line, 250, 294, 363, 2 home runs, 5 extra base hits in 26 games, with 5 walks to 21 strikeouts. He's splitting time between first base and DH. He has 15 starts at first base. He has 10 starts at DH, and he's done a couple pinch hitting appearances here and there to get him to 26 total games that he's played in. If I had to put money on this, I'm guessing Hosmer's going to be the transaction, because why would you have 2 lefty first base only players on the roster? The other guy who has played first base in Trey Mancini can also play. He's a right-handed hitter, so he's the other side of that platoon, but he can also handle outfield corners as well, so he has more options. And Matt Mervis doesn't have terrible platoon splits. 103.4 OPS versus righties, and 869 OPS versus lefties. Every time he's been challenged with, this is an issue you have, he's gotten better. He's gotten better against lefties. He's gotten better about that stuff down in the zone. And conversely, you look at Eric Hosmer, and that is one of the bluest StatCast pages that I have ever seen. Outside of defense at first base and max exit velo being 71st percentile, a lot of what Eric Hosmer's doing is blue. And not just kind of blue, but really blue. Combine that with the fact he's on a 1-year deal, it feels like that's going to be the transaction. I don't know if you've already done this. It may be too late. I went in my redraft league. I put in a claim for Matt Mervis. I spent a good amount of fab on Matt Mervis because I legitimately believe he's going to be able to hit well and play almost every day at the big league level. So very excited for Matt Mervis. He was our prospect of the pod, the most recent prospect of the pod, the guy who is major league ready, who for some reason is not yet up with their organization. If you have a suggestion of who our next prospect of the pod should be, feel free to reach out to us. I'm on Twitter at Crosby Baseball. Show's on Twitter at Locked On Farm. You can email us, lockedonmlbprospects@gmail.com, or drop it in the Locked On MLB Prospects Discord. Links in the episode description or the show notes. Great baseball community. We talk baseball all the time. Tons of fun. In just a minute, in the spirit of the Brandon Pfaadt and Gavin Stone debuts, there's a couple other pitchers that have debuted this week that had good debuts, and fans have asked me to break them down. And if you've listened to this show, if you're an everydayer, I'm going to give the people what they want. But first, today's episode is brought to you by our friends with BetterHelp. If you've benefited from therapy, then you understand the value of something like BetterHelp. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient. It's designed to be flexible, suited to your schedule. And the way that you pair up with the therapist is a lot better than other ways. When you go to an office now, and if you want to go see a therapist, you're going to come in, you're going to do an intake, and then you're limited to the 3 or 2 or 5 or whatever providers that they have there. And changing that person is difficult to do. But with BetterHelp, you fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist. And if for some reason you guys aren't vibing, if you're just not, and that happens with people, you have to have that right comfort and fit with your therapist. If you're not vibing, you can switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Because the whole goal here is for you to be comfortable so that you can understand and learn the tools to give you balance in life so that you can support others without leaving yourself behind. So find more balance with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnMLB today to get $10 off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnMLB. Okay, Bryce Miller of the Seattle Mariners had a fantastic start earlier this week, and we did not talk about it. And I have heard many of you say, why aren't we talking about this? So let's get into it. Bryce Miller on Tuesday facing off against the Oakland Athletics and Mason Miller, who we did talk about. So two Millers in the same game. And this was an absolute pitching battle. Bryce Miller was perfect into the 6th inning. But the Mariners were held hitless through 7 innings. It ended up being a 2-1 victory for the Mariners. Some little late inning magic there. But fantastic debut. So let's back up just a little bit. 2021 4th rounder out of Texas A&M for Bryce Miller. And when you look at the stuff that he has, it's some of the best, just pure stuff in that system. When they got him, it was a fastball, slider, changeup, curveball. He's done a little bit of work. He's ditched the curveball essentially completely, and he's replaced it with a cutter. And so what you have is you have a fastball that is 70 grade fastball. It normally sits 95, 96, and he can run it up to 100 when he wants to. I think he maxed at 97 on Tuesday on it, but he can run it higher. It has more in there. Again, the cutter also has the changeup. What I like is that it has a lot of like late fade to it. So that late movement is what keeps it from getting barreled, right? They're swinging in the right area for it, but they don't get a barrel on it because it has that late fade to it. And then a slider, which is mid 80s. It's harder, kind of sudden break to it, but again, it's late movement, so you like that. In 2022, he got 27 appearances, 26 of those were starts, between A-ball, high A, and double A. 3.16 ERA in 133 2/3 innings. So one of the lower, with 163 strikeouts, so one of the higher strikeout marks in the minors, to 46 walks. So 11 strikeouts per 9. 46 walks is 3.1 walks per 9. 10 home runs allowed. Been a little touch and go here in 2023 in Double-A Arkansas while he was getting everything nailed down with the new arsenal. So 4 starts, 6.41 ERA in 19 2/3 innings. Only 18 strikeouts, so 8.2 per 9 to 3 walks, 1.4 per 9, gave up 5 home runs. And I think a lot of that, we sometimes say you can't always trust the numbers because guys are working on stuff. Bryce Miller was working on stuff. And so that start that he makes on Tuesday, 6 innings pitched, 2 hits, 1 run, no walks, 10 strikeouts on 81 pitches, 57 strikes. Doesn't give up a hit, ends up giving up that run in the 6th inning. And just the third pitcher in American League and National League history to have 10 or more strikeouts and no walks in their debut. The list is Steven Strasburg, Johnny Cueto, and Bryce Miller. End of list. So with the fastball, averaged 95, again, topped out at 97. He had 13 swings and misses in the game. 11 of them were the fastball. He was very fastball heavy. So threw that 4-seamer 57 times out of his 81 pitches. So 70% of the time, Bryce Miller's throwing a dude a fastball. Again, 11 swings and misses. So his CSW rate, called strikes plus whiffs, 40%. So only 1 called strike. They knew what was coming, and they still could not hit it. And I think that's one of the big differences between, we talked about the debut of Brandon Pfaadt and how he struggled because he wasn't sequencing everything great against the Rangers. and Bryce Miller and how well he did, the opponent helps. I'll acknowledge that. Oakland is not a great team this year, but it's still a scenario where the fastball is a very, very good pitch. He threw 16 cutters, so 20% of the time, 2 swings and misses, another 2 called strikes, so 25% CSW rate. He threw 7 sliders, it's 9% of the time, no swings and misses, but 3 called strikes, so technically a 43% CSW rate. Really small sample size there, but kind of says that you're not terribly afraid of the shape of the slider. Like it's not too hard to hit, but guys aren't offering at it, and he can land it for a strike. That's what you can kind of learn from that. And then threw exactly 1 changeup. Threw 1 changeup. It was a called strike. So it is technically the most effective pitch in his arsenal because it has a 100% CSW rate. But on the game, 38% CSW rate. Very good performance for Bryce Miller. Ends up only giving up 2 hard hit balls in the outing. Obviously, like I said, doesn't get the win because they're held hitless into the 7th inning by Mason Miller, who has now made 2 fantastic starts. But exceptional outing for Bryce Miller. Very excited to watch what happens from here. I think it's something where he can be a number 3 on this team. They have a lot of young pitchers, obviously, but this stuff is so good, specifically the fastball. You give me a fastball cutter guy like this, and you can do something where to watch the workload, and or when you don't need as many starters as you get closer to the postseason or in the postseason, he can work in a high leverage relief situation. I think if you, not that you're going to, obviously you want him as a starter, but you can take Bryce Miller right now and make him your setup man, and he's going to be successful. So it's a great development story for the Mariners to say, hey, we realized this pitch mix wasn't really working. That curveball wasn't that good. Yes, it was there for weak contact, but it wasn't very reliable. Couldn't throw a ton of strikes with it. We're going to scrap it, replace it with a cutter. And so now he's got, if you count the changeup, which he only threw 1 time, you've got a couple different directions on your pitches. You've got a couple different velocity bands. It makes it very difficult for a hitter. In just a minute, I was asked by Jay on YouTube to talk about the debut of Jake Irvin. And for every single one of you who said, who is that? You're going to want to stay tuned. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends with Rocket Money. And listen, there are so many companies that their business model is predicated around you not knowing that you are using their product. They want to get you to do a trial, try it for 30 days or whatever it might be, and then forget about it. And they can just keep billing you every single month without actually having to deliver a service to you. That's the business model. Over 80% of Americans have a subscription they have forgotten about. And when you ask somebody how much are they spending a month on subscriptions, the standard guess is around $80. The actual data says it's closer to $200. And if you don't know exactly how much you're spending every month, you need Rocket Money. It will quickly and easily find your subscriptions for you. And if there's any you don't want to pay for anymore, you just hit cancel and Rocket Money will cancel it for you. It's that easy. It can also help you manage all your finances in one place and automatically categorize your expenses so you can easily track your budget in real time and get alerted if anything looks off. Over 3 million people have used Rocket Money, saving the average person up to $720 a year. So stop throwing your money away, cancel unwanted subscriptions, and manage your expenses the easy way by going to rocketmoney.com/lockedonmlb. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedonmlb to try Rocket Money. rocketmoney.com/lockedonmlb. Okay, so we did a video about Brandon Pfaadt and about Gavin Stone and just getting absolutely rocked in, or getting blasted. I think that's the words we use, getting blasted in their debuts. And Jay on YouTube says, you know who didn't get blasted in their pitching debut yesterday? Jake Irvin. Fair enough, Jay. You're right. Let's talk about Jake Irvin, because I genuinely, we have not talked about Jake Irvin yet on this show in the time that I've been the host. And part of the reason for that is he's one of those players that's kind of slipped through the cracks for different reasons. So 2018 fourth rounder out of Oklahoma. And he kind of started off that Oklahoma pitching pipeline that you see now. He was on the same team as Cade Cavalli for a year. He was drafted first. Cade Cavalli was drafted after him. 2019 started off pretty rough, ended up being an okay year. Obviously, 2020, you didn't have a full season, but he was pitching in instructs, hurt his elbow. Missed all of 2021 and got back on the mound on a limited basis last year. Ended up picking up just over 100 innings last year between high A and double A. 24 total starts, 3.83 ERA and 103 and a third innings, 107 strikeouts, so 9.3 per nine, to 28 walks, 2.4 per nine, and 9 home runs allowed. So goes into this season, he's in AAA Rochester, so he moves up this year. Since age 26 year, because you have to remember, he gets drafted, he's developing, pandemic, he loses time, he loses almost a full season, and then Tommy John, he loses another season plus to Tommy John. So he's 26 years old in AAA this year, and things aren't necessarily looking great. 5.64 ERA in his first 5 starts, 22 and a third innings, 20 strikeouts, so 8.1 per nine, just, under 1 strikeout per inning, 11 walks, so 4.4 per nine, and 3 home runs allowed. When he gave up 9 all of last year in 103 innings, he's already given up 3 in 22. So he gets called up because of somebody gets injured with the Nationals. And so they need somebody to come up, and they call him. Facing off against the Cubs, he goes out there, very first pitch in professional baseball on Wednesday. He hits Nico Horner, hit by pitch on his very first pitch. But turns around, strikes out Dansby Swanson, ends up facing 6 batters in the first inning, 28 total pitches. Gets out of it, ends up having a 1-2-3 inning in the second and a 1-2-3 inning in the fourth. Finishes the outing 4 1/3 innings, 2 hits, 1 run, 4 walks to 3 strikeouts on 81 pitches, 45 of those being strikes. And he's one of those guys where nothing that he throws is absurdly great, but he has an underrated curveball. So in the outing, he throws 81 total pitches, like I said, 29 of those are the four-seam fastball. Sits around 93 or so. Again, not anything that blows you away from a velocity standpoint, right? No swings and misses on it, but 7 called strikes. He's able to locate it pretty decently. 24% CSW rate, which the goal is 30 for a fastball, especially a lower velocity fastball like that. I mean, he is a righty throwing 93. So yes, let's give him credit for that fastball and what he was able to do with that fastball. 24% CSW rate for that fastball with that velocity is a very good job, and you will absolutely take it. The curveball throws 28 curveballs, so 1 less than the number of fastballs he throws. So 35% curveball, 3 swings and misses, 9 called strikes on the curveball, so a 43% CSW rate. It sits in the high 70s, and if I had to describe it, and it's actually kind of tough, I guess I would call it like a power slurve. So it kind of blends between a slider and a curveball, but it has that harder action like a power curve would have. So I guess a power slurve is kind of how you would describe this thing. Either way, it absolutely works, okay? Again, 43% CSW rate. Throws 13 changeups, 16% of the time. No swings and misses, but 3 called strikes, so 23% CSW rate. Throws 11 sinkers. And this is a newer pitch in the arsenal as well. He didn't always have a sinker. He was a fastball, curveball, changeup guy. And the changeup's not that great. Throws it a little too hard. It comes out, it averages around 87 or so. When again, the fastball is about 93. So 6 mile an hour separation. Ideally, you're looking for 9 to 10 miles an hour of separation on those just to have them in completely distinct velocity bands. So he adds a sinker, which comes in around 92 or so. There was 11 of those, 1 swing and miss, 3 called strikes, 36% CSW rate. So for the game, 81 pitches, 32% CSW rate, over 30%, that's what we're looking for. 3 hard-to-hit balls in the entire outing. This is something where the Washington Nationals have a ton of pitchers in the system, but they've been waiting for these guys to develop and get to the major league level. Because right now, you're looking for competence. You're looking for guys who can be, Patrick Corbin going into Thursday had been statistically like the worst starter in baseball the last 2 or 3 seasons. You haven't seen Steven Strasburg at all. He just has not pitched, has not existed as a contributing member of the Washington Nationals, but he's still cashing those checks, and I'm fine with that because I'm always fine with players getting paid. You see youngster Mackenzie Gore, part of the Juan Soto trade. You see Josiah Gray, 25 years old. They signed Trevor Williams as a free agent, so he's in the rotation, but Jake Irvin gives them another starting option while they're developing, getting the last touches on some of these pitchers. Your Cade Cavalli, your Jackson Rutledge. A lot of guys in the middle part of this top 30. Jarlin Susana is a little bit of a younger guy, but came in the Juan Soto deal. Thad Ward, Cole Henry, Jake Bennett. There's a lot of arms in this system. You're just trying to develop them to get them to the bigs. And Jake Irvin profiles as a back of the rotation guy, but he raises the floor, right? Guys like Jake Irvin are what stop you from losing 110 games. Jake Irvin doesn't win you the World Series, but Jake Irvin stops you from being a bad team because at the end of the day, he's a good baseball player. And that's what the Nationals have needed, and that's what Jake Irvin was able to give the Washington Nationals on Wednesday. About to have a fantastic weekend. We're going to get to go watch LSU play in person. So Dylan Cruz and Paul Skeens, probably your number 1 and number 2 overall picks in the draft. Going to see them in person on Friday and Saturday. So look for that coming up on a draft show next week. In the meantime, if you have questions for Monday's mailbag, I'm on Twitter at Crosby Baseball. Show's on Twitter at Locked On Farm. You can email us, lockedonmlbprospects@gmail.com, or drop your questions into Locked On MLB Prospects Discord. Links in the episode description, links in the show notes. Until Monday's show, have a great weekend, and remember, it's always a great time to pay a minor leaguer.